For the one or two that don't already know Kosetsu, would it be helpful if I give his brief bio?
I wish you would. This is Atlanta Soda Zen Center, September 27 today. 27? 28. 28. So it's the fourth Sunday of the month in which we usually feature a talk on by myself. And Kosetsu Randy Earl is here on Ango. Ango is a practice period, typically 90 days. This is his third practice period of 30 days. And those of you who are interested in the formal path, please contact me about what it means to be on Ango. And it's different for everyone. It's a custom kind of program. It's not a set bit of functions that we do, but amongst other things, you help team teacher, you teach under supervision. So that's what Kosetsu is doing this morning. I would like you to start, when you start, by just explaining your Dharma name, what it means, because I forgot.
Okay. So, John, did you want to do the quick bio?
Yes. Yes. Good morning. It's my honor to introduce our speaker this morning. Kosetsu Randy Earl began formal Zen training with Taiyun Elliston Roshi after taking the precepts in 2003. When career moves took him away from Atlanta, he continued to train remotely and visit for retreats, taking Shukkei Takudo in 2013. Kosetsu served as Zen chaplain at the North Carolina State University for several years and is currently an STO member at large, having earned a BS in physics, an MBA, and worked in a career spanning engineering, research, and design. Kosetsu retired in 2024. He now resides in Raleigh, North Carolina with his wife, near his 3 children and 5 grandchildren. Kosetsu, we welcome you.
Happy to be here, as always. Thank you, John. So, first of all, I welcome kind of an open discussion. If you have a question, please feel free to jump in with that. I may then defer it till later, or may answer it in the flow. We'll see how that goes. Sensei asked me to explain my Dharma name. So my Dharma name is Kosetsu. You'll often hear people say Kosetsu because in Japanese the final U is often dropped or barely audible. And it comes from the teachings, as most of our Dharma names do, and it refers to the short phrase is universal preaching, and it refers to a doctrine called the teachings of the insentient. That if you listen carefully enough, the entire universe is expounding the Dharma. Or I think it was Hojo's way of just telling me, shut up and listen. So instead, I'm sitting here talking. So I'm not very good at following instructions. As we mentioned, I'm here on Ango. It's any type of participation is an opportunity to deepen your practice. You know, sitting at home is good. Coming on Sundays with Sangha is good. You know, sitting with others, going on retreat for a few days. Several of us were just at Watershed last weekend, our retreat center in Western North Carolina. That was truly lovely. And then opportunities like an extended period, Ango 30 days is what I'm doing, because as Hojo said, it's traditionally 90 days, but it's hard to do. And if in the householder's life. And, you know, I was able to get 30 days off work a couple of times, and that was challenging enough. So in order to make it easier for folks, we break it up into 3 30-day periods if you would like to do that, or 1, you know, whatever. But I'm on the formal practice path. I think Hojo might have mentioned that. So because I've wanted to be of service to others in the Sangha, I did serve as chaplain at the university. And he said, well, if you're going to do that, you should have the credentialing to go with it, you know, and go through the formal practice path. So now I am doing that. And as a part of the formal practice path, the path to become a teacher, we take a vow to save all sentient beings. And, that's what Buddha was doing. So how do we do that? That's the question, right? How do we do that? That's a tricky one. And so I've been thinking about this a lot lately. As being on the path to be a teacher, I was like, what does that mean? How am I going to do that? And when I look back at the teachings, um, the Buddha struggled with that a bit in the beginning as well. He said, the ultimate truth, shunyata, is beyond words, right? So how can you teach it if it's beyond words? And he despaired a little bit of being able to do that. He said, well, it's just you have to find it for yourself. I can't tell you. But then, out of compassion, he kept trying, and he found ways to point to the path. And in the teachings, many times you'll see that described as upaya. This term upaya is very commonly referred to, used. There's a upaya center you may have heard of, and that phrase means skillful means or expedient means, right? And Nagarjuna and many others have said the entirety of the Buddha's teachings were upaya. It was skillful means to try and help point you, not tell you the ultimate truth, but to point you to it, to encourage you along the path, to help you overcome obstacles along the way. And it's important to understand what that means, right? And we'll talk about this in a couple of different ways. So, I see upaya meaning it is first of all compassionate, right? Out of desire to help suffering beings, but it's also flexible. You see that in the teachings. He uses different methods at different times, and it's context sensitive. That's very important. That's why we talk about student-teacher relationships, because you can write a book, you can produce a podcast, you can record a Dharma talk or whatever. That's great, but in a lot of those cases, there's no back and forth dialogue. It's hard to know your audience. When you look at the sutras, the Buddha would answer questions different ways in different cases. He would use stories, parables, metaphors. Sometimes he wouldn't answer at all because he couldn't think of an answer that was going to help this person. When asked one time, Ananda said, "Why didn't you answer that question?" He said, "Given that person's current state of understanding, I could think of no answer that would not just lead to further confusion." um, so, upaya encourages compassion over dogmatism, which can be kind of hard for us in Western culture used to Judaic traditions to understand. Well, there's not a dogma, there's not, a set method. And so upaya really implies that the teachings are provisional tools, not absolute truths, right? Because the absolute truth is something you have to find for yourself. And this is where we come to a metaphor you may have heard before. It's like a raft that you use to cross the river. And once you cross the river, you just leave the raft on the shore and continue on your way. So hopefully we use upaya. And so now, when we look at it from the English perspective, skillful means, it's interesting. The root word skill, right? Skill is a learned power of doing something competently, and aptitude or ability. And these are things that we can develop, right? And it also means that we all know that we all have different skill sets, different aptitudes, different abilities. So that means it's going to be a little bit unique for each one of us. Maybe there are some standard things that we can all do pretty well. In a literate society, we can all read and write, but some of us can play music and some can't. And, with just a broad range of skills and aptitudes we bring to it. And the other thing is, we have to remember it's not in the word, but it needs to be context aware to be effective, right? I am giving a talk here. You have come to a Zen center, So we have some newcomers and welcome, but I can assume some level of knowledge, some level of background knowledge. Maybe not a massive level of background, but some level. Whereas if I was giving a public talk, I would not say some of the things because I'm going to refer to a couple of stories without telling the whole story, right? And I can do that here probably. Um, so, and let's look at examples throughout the tradition of this application of upaya. Um, the Buddha used metaphors, like one of the early basic metaphors was explaining dukkha, dissatisfaction, um, disharmony, suffering. He talked about the wheel on an ox cart, and we think about, or excuse me, the axle on the wheel, and we don't realize why that might be a good metaphor because we're used to metal and precision machining and lubrication and ball bearings. And no, this was very primitive. Even when first made, it probably didn't work really well. And then after wearing in a little bit, it gets off center and it's really problematic, you know. So in their day, that was probably a really effective metaphor. And he used parables, like the parable of the arrow. This is where, if somebody's shot with an arrow, it's talking about do you want dogma or do you want effectiveness? If somebody's shot with an arrow and somebody's trying to treat him and says, before you pull the arrow out, before you treat me, I want to know who shot the arrow, what tribe they're from and why, all these things. And it's like, okay, well, you bleed to death while we were telling you all that. Let us patch you up first. So he used those kinds of parables. He used actions like on Vulture Peak. He put a flower, and that's when that triggered the recognition of Akashapa's awakening. And then sometimes, as I mentioned before, he just didn't answer because an answer was not appropriate at that time. And if we fast forward, how many, like 1,200 years or so to Mr. Dogen, father of the Soto tradition. Dogen did the same thing. He used a lot of metaphors as well, but you can see that he used some of Buddha's metaphors, but then he used some of that were more appropriate to his time and his culture and his audience, right? And the funny thing is, both of those sets can be really hard for us to understand because even though it was 1,200 years later, Dogen's life wasn't that much different from Buddha's life, whereas our lifestyle is radically different from both of them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But another example that Dogen used that the Buddha didn't do. Dogen used a lot of real life examples. There's a story of the Tenzo drying mushrooms, right? And I won't go into that. He wrote an entire treatise called Tenzo Kyokun, Instructions to the Cook, right? Which for people who come into it at first may think, well, that's a kind of a mundane job. Everybody has to cook, um, and on our retreat, we saw what it's like to have a good cook. That was, thank you, Ian. That was, it makes a big difference. But anyway, a lot of people could say, well, why was he writing instructions to the cook? He was using that as a skillful means to point out that every task is important and every task can be part of your practice. So that was part of his upaya and explaining to his audience. And then we're gonna zoom forward a little bit more. Well, let's stay there. Let's look at other traditional examples while we're still in medieval Japan. Um, not just the teachings, but how to have things operate. The Vinaya, the rules of engagement of monks living together in a monastic setting or engaging in the community. They have rules so that they could have a system and teaching.
And they had more rules for the nuns than they did for the monks.
Oh, well, okay. I wasn't aware of that. But isn't that always the way in a patriarchal society? But, another example of just sheer practicality, if you've ever eaten oryoki style, and okay, I see a nod. Have you had experience with that? Okay, well, we can point that out to you at some point. But you think about that is in the medieval time, how do you feed monks and maintain sanitary standards when you don't have dishwashers and things like that? So oryoki is an eminently practical method of serving food and eating and maintaining some level of sanitation, which has also been turned into a kind of a ritual teaching method that once you learn it is rather beautiful and very nice. So again, upaya at all in all aspects of the practice. Um, so now let's zoom forward like 700 years or so and look at our lineage. Matsuoka, O Sensei, our teacher's teacher, he left the traditional monastic model in Japan and came to where the teachings were needed here in the West, in the US, and to a different audience, to householders, right? And that was expedient. That was meeting what was needed, for which we are all grateful. And then, of course, we'll slow down our approach a little bit. You know, we've been zooming across hundreds of years. Now let's jump from Matsuoka to Elliston Roshi. If you look around the Zendo here, you know, the vast majority of the furnishings and the altar and the design of the Zendo, he designed, he built. He wanted a Zendo. This is America. You know, you can't find, um, you can't just go out and buy Zendo furnishings, or at least not when he was setting it up. He had to make them, had to design them and make them. That was upaya. That was expedient, skillful means. Little things like in the talk yesterday, he was telling us, okay, you know, little tips and tricks. There was this master class yesterday, and he recommends keeping a little notebook, a little notebook by your cushion, because it's a trap where a lot of times you're relaxing and observing thoughts and letting go of thoughts. And then there's like a really important one. Oh, I shouldn't let go of that one. I need to remember that one. You can get stuck in this trap of, I can't forget that. I'm sitting here, but I can't forget that. And you get stuck in that loop. And he says, well, just keep a little notebook, write it down. Then you can let it go because you don't have to worry about remembering it. And you think about, well, why didn't Dogen recommend that? Well, writing was a very different thing then. Paper was precious and expensive, and to write, you had to get an inkstone and crush out some ink and add water, some powder, and add water and make your ink and get brushes and, you know, do calligraphy. And it was not a quick and simple exercise. It didn't make any sense. But now, looking at the current situation, he says, well, we've got ballpoint pens and little notebooks. Keep one by your cushion. You know, it's, yeah. So, but then I would say Hojo's biggest example of skillful means is his approach to teaching and writing. And if you've read a lot of Zen books, which many of you probably have, and if you read his books, you'll probably notice a difference. He has a very different approach. A lot of them tend to be very esoteric, kind of following the stereotypical Zen aesthetic. And I'm not bashing that. That can be quite beautiful and quite helpful. It also can be quite abstract and difficult for people to understand, especially new to the tradition. Whereas his writings use modern metaphors, modern language, analytical methods, mental models, and diagrams of those models to help people. But then he also, you know, he tries to say, okay, here's a modern Westerner, this is how you understand it. And then he kind of segues into this is the traditional teachings and this is the mystery that it's pointing to, you know, and helps us along that way. And that's kind of rare in the Zen books.
That comes from really a design training, the Bauhaus method. So I kind of live at the intersection of Zen and design thinking, you could say. And that's a big category nowadays. And I'm pre-digital. That is, you know, all of my training experience confronted the digital revolution as that transition came in. Design circles, that was very difficult. People didn't want to leave the drawing board and go to a laptop, keyboard, approach, a mouse, and so forth. So I was part of that. And Randy is post-digital, very much post-digital. So he's been composing a lot of information. Those of you who are into the IT world, while Randy's here, you want to get with him and go to lunch or something and have some dialogue, because he is as thoroughly into design thinking in the post-digital sense as I was trained in the pre-digital sense.
Thank you.
Each of you can find this, what intersection am I at? But if you think about your music, right, for one thing, and you're a parent. I'm at the intersection of parenting and Zen. Music is Zen.
Hojo doesn't know it because he hasn't seen my talk, but he's just segued nicely into something I'm going to talk about in a few more minutes. But
Reading your mind.
yeah, well, yeah, mind to mind. But I confess that I'm cheating a little bit with this example of using his teachings because I think I got kind of ahead of myself. Let's see. But anyway, so I have been reading a little bit a book. We started a new book in the study group that I think is a great example of this. It's a book of koan discussion and commentary. And how many of you have ever read any of the koan collections? Okay, several. And read the commentaries that went with it. And maybe it was just me, so you don't have to raise hands, but were any of you like still left after reading the koan and the commentary kind of like, I still don't quite get it, you know? That I will confess that's the case with me. And this collection, and I'm not shamelessly plugging a book, although maybe I am, but I'm talking about it because I think this is an excellent example of upaya. And John, we can send you the link. This is Zen koans for the unenlightened: conversations with Taiyun Elliston Roshi by Katsuryu Bill Cooper. I'm going to talk about that more.
Can we pass it around?
Yeah.
Hold on. Just take a quick look.
Yeah.
Thumb through the table.
So it's a collection of koan discussions between Hojo and one of our Sangha members, Katsuryu. I don't know if he's online. We were recording it, so I hope he gets to watch it. And I've read koan collections before and come away confused, and if that's the case with you, give this one a try because it has Elson Roshi's approach, which is much more amenable to the Western mindset in terms of explaining them. But also, what I think is a really rare gift. This collection is different in that Katsuryu has given the Sangha an incredible gift by opening up his private discussions. And there's a vulnerability there because, you enter these discussions saying, I don't understand, and okay, now you've explained it to me. I still don't understand.
It wasn't meant to be a book. It was online dokusan.
Yeah. But Katsuryu has decided to share this with everybody, and he has his personal statements, in italics, which to me, when we read koan studies and ancient metaphors and ancient language, it seems very, very remote. This makes it very real. It's like, wow, okay, this is what my koan study or my dokusan is like.
I may be preempting you, reading your mind. One of the things we emphasize there is context. How do you contextualize these koans? Not only in their time, like the one, the donkey in the well. There was a real donkey. There's a real well. That's how they got their water. And the donkey's looking at the well. The donkey's probably thirsty. So sort of visualizing the context in which this actually happened. And then bring it forward to contextualize it in our room. I used to walk by a farm on the way to school, and there was a donkey. Would stop and see the donkey every day, right? But I think, how many of you have actually seen a real donkey up close and personal, where you can smell it? But it's more and more rare. Contextualizing both ways is one of the Kosetsu's points.
Yep. So to me, this makes the tradition of the student-teacher dialogue very approachable in a deep way that to me just doesn't resonate when I read the old koan collection. So to me, this is a wonderful example of paya, of skillful means, not only of Hojo, but of Katsuryu, of sharing that with the Sangha and going through the effort to prepare this for publication and put it out there. So
it's appropriate here with that. Matsuoka would say we teach each other Buddhism.
Yes.
Yeah. Not a one-way street.
So I've been talking a lot about upaya, skillful means, right? Which hopefully I think was helpful. But I had mentioned earlier that this was particularly important to me right now. So why is this particularly important to me right now? And again, so many people are kind of way ahead of me, were talking about, well, how do you find what is my path? And so if I'm going to be a teacher, if I'm going to do this more, what is my voice? What is my approach? Any of you who know teachers know we were just talking about Hojo's unique style, and other teachers have unique styles. What is my unique style? Not in terms of hopefully, I'm not looking at it in terms of what makes me cool and special, but what will be effective in reaching.
And what intersection do you actually occupy?
Yeah, see, I'm gonna have to pay you for all these all these segues you're giving me. So I'm looking at my uh, intersections that I occupy. So he mentioned technology. I worked in technology. I like technology. Um, I have found it to be a very useful tool for me. I'm not kind of into technology for technology's sake. I'm always into it for how is it useful for me. Um, and he's very nice to give me the credit he does. I will say that I've retired and technology marches on, so I'm rapidly becoming out of date, right? But I do like to keep my hand in. Um, so am I going to be the tech guy? Am I always going to be looking at Zen in the digital age? Well, I'll do that some. We did it some Friday night. It's kind of a lead in, but I don't want to be, what do you call it when you're,
Television?
no, or locked into only that, limited to that realm. My degree is in physics, and I love physics and science. What could I be? One of those guys. And there are several, the books about the Tao of physics and Helgoland by Carlo Rovelli and many others. Am I going to be one of those guys that uses physics, science metaphors to help explain? Well, maybe sometimes, but that's kind of a small audience, small intersection. Um, so again, skillful means I might use that when it's appropriate. I might use technology when it's appropriate. Um, and I have skills and knowledge in some areas. Other areas. I've worked in design. Um, I've worked in research. I've been a manager of teams and divisions. Um, but I hadn't. When I think about, well, should I be like post-digital Zen teacher or should I be physics Zen teacher? None of that kind of really grabbed me. And I was trying to think about. I feel like there's strongly a theme, and I can't identify it. I don't know what it is yet. And through my career, I did a lot of travel. And whenever I traveled, the other guys would go out drinking or whatever, and I would go to the Zen Center of Los Angeles. I went to LA a lot, and wherever we went, I went to Zen centers in the U.S., East Coast, West Coast, and Europe, and things like that. So I went to Zen centers, and I met uh, a lot of people, teachers. I had Dokusan with some teachers. I attended talks by other teachers, and some of them impacted me very, very strongly. But none of them I felt like that connection of this could be my teacher. There's a strong enough common understanding. And then I came to Atlanta. I was only here for like 18 months, but it kind of clicked, you know. And it's a why. And then I moved away. I said, well, that's kind of the end of that. But then Hojo kindly offered, well, we have technology. Um, you don't have you're living in Switzerland, but that doesn't mean we can't talk. So we we kept in touch to each other, as Montuoka says.
Keep contact to each
Yeah,
other.
yeah. So and then even though I've never lived in Atlanta since, I'm used to traveling, so I would come for retreats and ongo and things like that, and we can and of course with Zoom we've been doing for how many years now, um, online conferencing and
For all the good it's done.
ouch. So right. Um, so and I felt a strong resonance with our lineage, and I'm wondering, well, why is that? And I'll come to the punchline. To me, the label I'm putting on it is pragmatic Zen. To me, pragmatic is very much like upaya. It's just the modern Western word for it, right? And and I think, well, when I look at my life, I've traveled quite a lot for business. I've always you can get a meditation cushion that's got one of these covers with a beach ball in the middle. So I keep that in my suitcase. It's extremely lightweight, and I get to a hotel and I blow it up, and I can sit and meditate. And I've done that for years. I love hiking, and I found that I don't want to carry a cushion, but if I take my boots off and position them just right, boots work fairly well for meditation. Or I lived in Switzerland. I sat zazen in the Alps in the snow, and as long as you've got waterproof pants, and the snow's deep enough, you can dig out a little hole and kind of wiggle your bottom, and you get a really nice place to sit. And the same thing with beaches. I was in Hawaii this summer, and I meditated on the beach. And to me, those are skillful means. A zendo is nice. A bench and a zapu and a zabuton is nice, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to meditate when I don't have those things. I can find skillful means to work around it. And at work, I set up a work group. Tuesday mornings, I would bring in some cushions, and it was just anybody who wanted to join in. And again, knowing your audience, right? There was no ritual, no chanting, just zazen instruction and sitting meditation. When I was chaplain on campus, we didn't have an assigned room even. It was a different classroom every week. We had no place for storage. So I got my old Navy sea bag. You remember sailors with their sea bags, the big, and I would fill that full of cushions, and I'd throw some sheep wool blankets over my arms for below. And the parking was far away. So I was always worried the campus police was going to think I was some homeless guy. But that was what I could do for the group. That was my skillful means.
That's how we started here at Cliff Alleyway, carrying garbage bags full of cushions and out every week.
And I always try to ground my talks in personal experience, not hypotheticals, right? Because I figure if I've had this experience, I'm human, you're human, you've probably had, or a fair number of you have had a similar experience, and so it will resonate, hopefully. Um, and I kind of got that lesson in teaching the college students because they love the hypotheticals. What about if this and this and this? And this? Okay, well, you could spend time thinking about that, but how is this going to affect, like right here, right now, or a real life situation? Give me a real life situation where that. Let's deal with that. So I feel like I've always tried to take the practical approach to my practice whenever possible, and I'm calling that pragmatic Zen. Just again, labeling is helpful sometimes. You've got to be careful not to get stuck in labels. Sometimes labels are helpful. And just a note on words. Why are you saying pragmatic? It's like a $10 version of practical. Well, to me, practical is like action oriented. If you do, this task that serves this utility, that's practical. Whereas pragmatic is more about a mindset of finding practical solutions to problems on an ongoing basis. So to me, when I had that thought, it kind of clicked. To your point about, well, how do you find your voice, your path? That's when it kind of clicked for me. I think it aligns with compare myself to the Buddha, to the Buddha's methods of teaching, right? Finding what works to all through, and to our lineage in particular. Coming back to why it kind of clicked here is like, why do I think this teacher and this lineage is a fit for me? Because I think it was a focus on practicality for a given audience. In our case, it's for householders, for those of us who had jobs and families and commutes and obligations and so on. So I think this is the most accurate and true way to describe my practice. And now it helps give me a way to focus, because part of my task, Hojo talked about Angos is not a fixed program. You kind of design your own. Well, part of my design for this Ango is I want to be able to define, if I'm going to undertake this role as teacher, I want to look at, well, what is it traditionally defined as? And there's some flexibility there. And what do I think I can do, and what does the community need? And let's look at the intersection of those. And, do we agree that that's a good enough fit that I should proceed? All right, so that's kind of my.
Longos are designed to benefit the individual, but also the community. And he's in residence, and he's in service to the Soun. He's here. Take advantage of it.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Shameless plug.
Use him.
Yeah, please. I love to meet with people and to chat with people. And that sometimes I can be a little too chatty on a retreat or something. Say shh, or before and after calls. But yes, I have defined that as part of my role here. Like if you're a newcomer and you want to chat, have questions, you want me to show you Orioki, I got my Orioki set out there and I can show you what that means. Sorry, I don't mean to pick on you. It's just you. I'll pick on anybody. Uh, um, yes. I would love to meet and chat with anybody, and it could be here, it could be via Zoom, it could be while I'm here. It could be sometime later. I've had conversations with on Friday night. Phil, I shouldn't mention people's names. I won't mention last name. He and I had talked before, and we kind of continued the discussion on the Friday night session. And there are other people like that where I've had discussions with them offline. So
you may not be aware of the Friday night session news while he's here. Friday at 7.
Mm-hmm.
So he's holding
30 minutes of sitting.
Yeah.
Tea and cookies. I'm going to subject you to gluten-free cookies. Sorry. And discussion. I framed it broadly as, hey, let's talk about practice in the 21st century. 21st century, and then we can go anywhere you want to from there.
How do you make it work in your life?
Yes. Back to that whole, how do we make this work? The pragmatic approach, the upaya. So, if you've heard my talks before, if you hear talks in the future, you'll probably detect a thread running through them along these lines, or at least I hope so, because it seems to be effective. And as long as it continues to be effective, I will continue to do that.
That's one meaning of sutra, by the way, thread running through.
I hadn't thought about that. So I think I've talked long enough. I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank you all for being part of my Sangha, for letting me be part of your Sangha. You couldn't do this without Sangha. And you are one of the 3 treasures. Thank you.
Before we open up to questions, I wanted you to comment a little bit. One thing that Kosetsu Randy did was he started drawing comparisons. The semantic models that I do are like that. They show you the relationships between the different aspects of the teachings. And he started comparing AI to what we call delusion in human consciousness. How might that appear in artificial intelligence? I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but I just thought that was an interesting construct.
I think I did a whole talk on that. So the easier answer is, go to YouTube and it's recorded. The long answer is, AI is trained on our content, right? And so it's an averaging machine in a lot of ways. So it averages whatever delusion we have in our content, and there's a lot of it. We get an averaging of that delusion and sometimes an amplifying of it. So my point was, I'm not anti-AI. I use AI, but I also like woodworking, and my analogies are with tools. Like the more powerful a tool is, the more dangerous it is. Like table saws. Table saws are great, and there's a lot of woodworkers that are missing a finger, part of a finger. And I've never known a woodworker that cut off a finger with a handsaw. So same thing with AI. It can take you down a wrong path really quickly and sound very authoritative while doing it, but it can be extremely helpful in other ways. So that was kind of the short summary.
By the way, I want to announce before we move on, we're planning to do a woodworking demonstration here where we're going to make 2 gift suckling sticks. He'll make one, I'll make one, and we'll do it. We'll be outside on a work table. And another one that we plan while Randy is here, we haven't set dates yet, but keep an eye on, is a shodo, which means brush painting, workshop. He's interested in brush painting. I do, along with the other art that I do brush paint. So we're going to do a workshop on that, how to paint bamboo how to paint it, and so and more creative approaches to shodo, which is brush painting.
Cyrus, were you starting to raise your hand?
Yes. I was wondering, so the computers now, they can translate pretty well. Do you think that there is any a system that can translate Pali sutras to English? And you can basically get more sutras, or you just check it out.
It's interesting. I'm going to give not quite a direct answer to that yet. My direct answer is I don't know. But I was asked to be on an interfaith panel a couple of months ago by ServiceNow, which is, if you're not familiar with them, they're one of the big AI service providers to enterprises. And the one of the Christian members of the interfaith group, it was a fantastic discussion. It was great. Um, and one of the things that a Christian representative was very excited about was that they could get Bible translations done and translations of other documents. They had already made big progress in that. Now, whether Pali is available yet or not, I don't know. But I imagine that there are a lot of people who, are working on things like that. So I would imagine it's going to be coming soon.
So that's Hebrew, right? The Bible.
Well, there's Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic and all kinds of sources. Yeah. But also true. There's which translation are you talking about? Translating from ancient sources to modern English for us, but then from modern English to what are there, a couple of hundred languages in the world, to translating it back out to these others. And that's what this person was talking about, was providing translations of, whatever English version they like, to other populations, which is
Okay, so John, let's switch to online. Got anybody there? Has a question or comment?
Good morning, Zoom group. Does anyone have a question, a thought, a comment that you'd like to address to Kosetsu? I'll, Teshin, Teshin, please.
It's not a question, just a thank you for the talk. Enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
Kosetsu, I've got a question for you. Knowing that this is your third Ango, am I correct?
You are?
As you pack up and prepare to come, and now that you're here, could you reflect a little bit on both of the binaries? What that means is, could you reflect for a minute or two on what you see as the meaningful, rewarding parts of your angos? And for those of us that haven't participated, what do you personally find to be the most challenging, the most difficult parts of the ango that you're confronted with?
Okay. And help me keep track of, there were a few things in there, so help me keep track if I forget one, So I'm watching the little chameleon or lizard on the bottom right corner of the window there. Yep. That's cute. Oh, it fell off. So sorry, I'm like a dog, squirrel. So
We had one at the conference room the other day.
yeah. So in preparing for Ango, Hojo said, there's kind of some expected things and there's kind of a plan your own aspect to it. And I think it's very important to look at, kind of keep it balanced, a Buddha practice aspect, a Dharma practice aspect, and a Sangha practice aspect. And for those newcomers you probably know anyway, Buddha is Buddha practices are shorthand for meditation, right? Dharma practice is shorthand for studying the sutras, working together in book groups, discussion groups, and and then Sangha practice is meeting with the Sangha, which also overlaps a lot in terms of the book groups and meetings and things like this. So I think a well-balanced Ango should contain elements of all of those, right? And that can be different for different people.
3 S's: sitting, study, service.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I like that. I hadn't thought about that one. I'm still learning. So that is one thing, and then you have some flexibility over, like he was talking about. Well, we're going to do some hand work, some making a kiyosaku, and maybe some brush work for if people are interested in that. And there are other things that can be done, and anything done through the right lens and mindfully can be a practice, can be a teaching. You were asking, what do I find most rewarding? Which is an interesting question, because I am by nature an introvert. I have learned over the years, to be with people and to actually enjoy being with people. And the definition of introvert versus extrovert, is like, but it takes some energy. After doing that, I'm a bit exhausted and I need a rest. Doesn't mean it was bad. It just means it takes work for me to do that. And so it surprised me how much I enjoy meeting with people. As I said earlier, I really do. I enjoy that. And it surprised me, because when I first came to Zen, it's like, oh, I can walk in, I can go stare at the wall, and I can leave without talking to anybody. This is my kind of place, and I did that for a long time. So that did surprise me, and it has been, each time that I've come, there have been different people in residence, different personalities, different issues, and each time, with more than one person, I found some aspect of the relationship with them to be rewarding, and uh, particularly enjoyed that. Does that answer that part?
Yes.
Okay. Now for the challenging part. Okay. Now the question is, how vulnerable do I want to be? Um,
How accusatory do you want to be?
well, if I'm accusing anybody, it's going to be me. But I will.
Kosetsu,
Huh?
let's go. Let's aspire for total transparency. And in
Wow.
and
No
and
pressure.
in doing that, you deliver a, an amazing teaching in itself.
We're seeing too much of that in the political realm. We don't want that.
Okay, so I'm going to give an easy one, then a hard one. The easy one to confess to is a rigid schedule. And Sensei and I have talked about this. I'm retired now, and as anybody who hits my age, our age, knows, you run into, so you accumulate medical issues and histories, and sitting. I've had different surgeries on different knees, and so you'll see me alternate between a cushion and a seiza bench. Just kind of mix it up on the knees. I was talking about, as I get older, I find disruptions in my routine harder in terms of eating and sleeping and rest and exercise, and and so coming here is very different from my home routine, and it's kind of fixed. I commit to being up for the 6 a.m. meditation every day, things like that.
You might want to amplify that with your celiac situation.
Oh, yes.
Eating much.
That's a good point. So I have celiac disease, and so I had to look at my options. It's like, well, do I come and stay as a residence in one of the rooms and share a kitchen and drive everybody else crazy with, can we please have a gluten-free kitchen while I'm here, which is a real imposition on them, or I run the risk of getting dosed, right, which is a serious problem for me. So fortunately, this Zen center, having expedient means, has some Airstream trailers out back. So for a couple of years, I brought my own RV, and then now I don't think it would pass inspection. So But I asked Laurel, and he wonderfully provided access to one of the airstreams so I can cook for myself. And I don't have to be driving everybody else crazy. But then that takes more time out of my day,
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
That's
So,
an important point because it's just so casual and easy for most of us,
yeah,
eat
the
foodies.
the logistics challenges. And by the way, another thank you to Ian for Watershed. He took care of me, made sure I had a gluten-free diet at Watershed. So that's the easy one to confess to. Okay, John, you're putting the squeeze on me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So as I get older, I am giving myself permission a bit more to, and it's part of my. Let me ease into it this way. Part of my management style with my teams and my departments and division and all was, anybody who's been a manager knows that there are different ways to manage people. And one of the ways that I did was I preferred to leverage strengths. And a lot of times managers like to find, well, this is where you're weak, so we're going to work on improving this. And you find somebody they're weak in something because it's not a skill, not a talent, they don't like it, and they're never going to be great at it. You can make them a little bit better. But to me, it's much more effective to take somebody and leverage their strengths. So like, what are you good at? Okay, let's give you the tools and give you the flexibility and run with it, and you can really get a lot more out of teams. Now you have to staff to, okay, this is a skill we need, and if we don't have it, we have to staff for it. But leveraging people's strengths, working with it, to me is a very effective way to go. So as I mentioned, I'm kind of looking at what is my role. I'm kind of like writing my job description, right? And there are certain things that are essentials, and there are certain things that let's apply upaya, skillful means, right? What's expedient, what's necessary for the context. So in my life, you may have heard a few times, I've moved around a lot for my career. I've been up and down the East Coast and 10 years in Europe and all around, and I've got kids and I got grandkids, and my daughter is now traveling to Europe. Daddy, I got a last minute flight to Germany. Can you take the boys on the weekend? And blah, 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 blah. And I just never have been the kind of guy that could open a center and be there and open the doors and on a regular schedule. I could support a college group where if I was there, great. And if I wasn't, they had backup things to do. And, I wasn't essential to them. That was my upaya. So typically when you come here for Ango and you're on the formal path, you train as Doan, timing, and Doshi, doing the ceremonial aspects. And the first part that was a struggle for me. I have a real problem with rote memorization. When I was in college, I was a physics major and my girlfriend was a chemistry major, and we joked that I learned all the rules and she learned all the exceptions, right? Because she could memorize and I could start with some basics and then build up everything else. And that's kind of the way I work. And rote memorization is really, really hard. Also, you said earlier in my examples of talents and skills, some people can play music and some people cannot. So when I'm on Doshi, he's kind of looking at me, Doan, looking at me, rolling his eyes because I'm speeding up and slowing down and all over the place with the beat. So that was really hard for me the first two Angos. And this time around, I came up with my plan and said, these are the things that I think I'm going to do on Ango. How does that sound? He said, sounds good. I said, did you notice anything missing? Because I was talking about what is not said is as important as what's said. I don't think so. And I said, Doan and Doshi train. And he said, oh, of course. I said, no. You said, of course. I said it's not on my list. And that was a hard discussion to have with my teacher, but this ties into my whole, and I'm told I take things too seriously, right? And my taking seriously about what can I offer, what makes sense. I'm not going to go home and open a center. My life just still never going to be stable enough for me to do that. I'm not going to have a space. I'm not going to have a need for ritual and ceremony like that. I like participating in it when I'm here. Being the one that's memorizing it and leading it is hard for me. But we've got lots of wonderful books and stuff. I can do it under duress, but I don't do it well. And I don't do it in the dark. I'm pointing at Daniel because Daniel bailed me out. Watershed, do the pre-dawn meditation, and there's candles flickering, and he asked me to take Doan and go over there, and I couldn't even see the book. So was that enough of a confession, John?
Thank you, Kosetsu.
Insert a caveat here. We follow these protocols and wear medieval outfits from Japan, which is kind of silly, because they're not for us. They're for the people who come. Mm. People are coming more and more from other centers. Soto Zen is kind of mainstreaming now in the rest of the country and in Europe. And so the idea, they tried to get everybody to follow a consensus translation of the Heart Sutra. Americans, no, that's not going to happen. So everywhere you go, you might hear a different version of the Heart Sutra, for instance. Everybody had their favorite one that the teacher gave them, right, or approved. So Americans are Americans. We're going to, what did Churchill say, we'll do everything. You can depend on us to do the right thing after we've tried everything else. We're in the phase of Americans trying everything else right now in terms of Zen. So the protocols are just what they are. I think the important thing about them is they're repetitious. Doing push-ups is repetitious. You don't get strong unless you do reps, right? Mm-hmm. So once you, as you were saying earlier, once you go through the protocols, they become empty of all the unhealthy or unworthy connotations that you have with them. And then they fill up like an empty teacup. They fill up new meaning for you. Yeah. So I think the most important thing is that we don't keep changing them up every week, mm-hmm. Every month. Just stay with what you got and go with it.
And if to continue that point, if I had a group at home and a space and could do it, if I could go home and practice it, that would be a different thing. But I come here for Ango, I practice it, and then I go away for 2 years, Yeah. And I mean, I come back for retreats and things, but in terms of training and practicing, I don't do it for 2 years. And I come back and do it again, then I don't do it for 2 years. And this time I just said, why?
Sabrina Barbara Cohn captured it very succinctly. She was at Austin's incident. I did it on 90 days there. And she was training me in these protocols and things. I said, Sensei Matoko, she didn't really emphasize this very much, And she says, well, it's better to know these forms and not do them than to not know them and not do them. It doesn't matter whether we do them or not, as long as we don't do anything that causes people confusion.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I don't value. I value ritual when I'm here. It's just I'm not the guy you want leading it because I'm going to mess it up.
If you go to AHG and Sojiji, totally different. And you wouldn't ever want it to get to that point here. It's just,
yeah. For anybody who trains with Sensei, he's very forgiving. And, a 1,000 times he has gently corrected people and me and, and he will continue to do that.
Swokaros had this wonderful phrase, you do something wrong, he come up and say, almost perfect, before I forget. What you did wrong.
I was interested when you were introduced that you have a BS of physics. Mm-hmm. The idea of physics and what we do here, what is there a relationship for you? I'm not talking about for anybody else. Physics is really hard.
I just want to remark on the BS part.
Yeah. He's keeping me humble. So yes, I really quick story. I went to college and I thought, well, electrical engineering sounds cool, and this was the 70s, right? We're just coming out of the transistor era. So yes, I'm that old. And I went into electrical engineering, and my advisor, who was teaching one of my classes, pulled me aside one time and said, you are disrupting class. You're asking too many questions, Why are you using a Fourier series transform to solve this? Because it works. But why does it work? And he said, if you want to know the answers to those kinds of questions, study physics. And I did, and I changed majors. So your question is, how does it intersect?
Or was that your intention?
No, it was not my intention.
Okay.
But I find they are both searching for answers, searching for truth. You've heard of the Big Bang Theory, right?
Oh yeah.
Do you know the father of the Big Bang Theory, Georges Lemaitre?
Yeah.
He was a Jesuit priest, but also a scientist. And I forget his quote exactly, but he said, I see that they are both paths of pursuing the truth, and I see no reason why not to follow both.
So the Word of God was a Big Bang.
If you look at either one of them dogmatically, there's problems. If you look at them both as fingers pointing at the moon, then they can be compatible and they can be useful metaphors, mental models. I have some, and we joke about this, because we use different. I joke that, well, whenever you see somebody on late night TV wanting to sell some snake oil, they sprinkle a little quantum verbiage over it. It's like, well, here's this spooky thing you don't understand, but it's got to be right because really, really smart people say quantum is true. And I get frustrated when people who don't understand quantum physics draw analogies to quantum physics to explain it. But then again, my understanding of that is really rooted in the days when I could speak differential equations, and my mental model where I think quantum physics really helps me have an understanding of interdependence. I can't explain to other people, because you don't have. It comes back to that skillful means. You don't have that background, that grounding and differential equations. So for me, it's helpful. And on some levels, I can draw some metaphors that I think are, because again, our culture, most of us have some very basic physics understanding. But for me, there is a deep connection. Does that answer your question?
There is or not?
There is a deep connection.
Okay. Yeah.
Good luck to you, John. Anybody online want to join the fray?
Feel free to raise a digital hand or to turn on the camera and raise a hand like Teshin did. Or you could even put a question or a comment in the chat box. Anyone have anything you'd like to bring forward? Oh, Joe, I think we're good for the moment.
Okay. Yeah, now.
That'll be great.
I want to, I guess, get a reflection. One is, I heard a definition of introvert versus extrovert that's helpful. One, which is how do you get your energy restored? So if you get your energy restored alone, you're introvert. If you get your energy restored with others, you're extrovert.
Right,
So
right.
another way of looking at it. Also, the thread that I heard in your talk that speaks to that intersection between where you find yourself in Zen is that by any means necessary, you get your practice now. Like all the way you went around the world and you still got your Zen practice. And that phrase, Malcolm X said, by any means necessary, and no excuses, those came to mind as I heard you share the way that you approach being involved with different groups. So that's something else that stood out to me and was very inspiring.
Thank you.
In terms of how you show up.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, we have these discussions as well. I mean, a Zendo is wonderful because it makes it easy for you. All you have to do is show up. You don't have to bring a cushion. You don't even have to know what to do because somebody will explain it to you. And there's supportive people here, but you don't always have access to a Zendo, and you can't take your Zendo with you when you travel. And sometimes some well-respected teachers, I'll say, well, I've meditated on the beach, or that's not Zazen. Okay, well, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to say I'm not going to do it. I'm going to, what was the phrase? Whatever it takes.
By any means.
By any means, yeah. I'm sorry if it's not your definition of Zazen, but, you know, this is what I'm going to do just because my job, my family, whatever, takes me away from my Zendo.
Your comment, you can't take it with you, triggered a memory. One of our early guys, his first experience in Zen was with a carnival. And the guy who owned and ran the carnival was the Zen guy. And so he had an idea that we should have a revival trailer, that we pull into town, and the sides flip down, can't turn us off. That's the Zendo. Town to town. Zen revival.
You got an Airstream back here.
Yeah.
Get on the road.
Right. Cool.
Everybody in Heart Sutra.
Yeah. Well, we're getting about 10 minutes left.
Definitely. I just want to say thank you so much for your talk, Kosetsu. Really appreciated it. And I really enjoyed what you had to say about kind of this attitude of pragmatism and how we kind of bring Zen into the 21st century, how we bring it into America. It strikes me that like we're in this really interesting time right now where as Hudson Sensei was saying, the Americans are trying everything else before we figure it out, right? Like it strikes me that like we're still experimenting with what it means to be a Zen practitioner and a layperson and an American all at the same time. It's so new. It's less than 100 years old.
I think, it would be fun to come back in 200 years and see what has kind of settled out as American Zen, because there's a flavor of Indian Buddhism, and there's a flavor of Japanese Buddhism, there's a flavor of Tibetan Buddhism, and Theravada and so on. It'll be interesting to see how ours settles out, and I think there are some outliers. Like I think Elston Roshi is one of the outliers in how he's breaking out of the traditional language in a lot of ways. Brad Warner is a famous example, and I say that with great respect for him. And there are a few others who are trying to experiment and say, how can we speak to them on an audience?
One of the points I make in the first book is we really all have to reinvent Zen for ourselves. We have to reinvent it so much.
Oh, Joe, we do have a question and comment from Paul.
Good.
Paul puts in the chat box, what about this as a metaphor for physics and Zen? Each of us maintains a singularity at our center. It's a mysterious point that we imagine, but can never completely penetrate.
I like that a lot. The tricky bit is scientists and physicists in particular, and some other people, it's being used more in the information science world, this use of the term singularity. So I think for some of the audience members have an understanding of what that means, and some may be talking about what are you talking? May not understand, may be wondering what we're talking about. So, but the nice thing is the word is somewhat self-explanatory. Singularity. It means there is a kind of a single, unique experience. And what I like about that is that, Hojo and Matsuoka and others had said that your enlightenment will be different from my enlightenment. It will be a unique, singular experience for each of us. We have our own life experiences. We have our own body and mind and so on. But yeah, and how did he? Can you read it again?
Sure. Each of us maintains a singularity at our center. It is a mysterious point that we imagine, but can never completely penetrate. How do you feel about this as a metaphor for physics and Zen?
Yes. So to me, he captured both ends of that. Paul did in terms of, yes, it's singular and unique, but that doesn't mean it's completely definable, labelable. It is still a mystery, still confronting the ineffable. So I like that, Paul, very much. Thank you for contributing it.
Now Paul is reading minds. I just recorded my podcast for next month, for October, this morning, and it is titled Approaching the Singularity. of Zen. May be so common.
He knows the term.
I think we're all sort of orbiting the black hole, in our lives, getting closer and closer, and eventually we pass the event horizon, go in down the rabbit hole.
Doesn't that make you want to find out about that? What would that be like?
Yeah. And on your cushion, you will find out. When Walker was here, I was there one time in Long Beach, and the guys were all in robes, things he was getting formal. Afterwards, we were sitting around, like having tea, and I said, "Well, in Atlanta, we have a little discussion. We talk about Zen." And Hans Walker says, "Question and answers on it." I said, "Well, of course, Sensei is correct." Afterwards, some of the guys were telling me, "We'd like to talk more." But Hans Walker made the point that your real answers to your real questions will come in your own experience on the cushion. I mean, we can talk about it and maybe workarounds, like a techie online helping you on your computer, but that's about it. The athlete's willing to do the work, and coaching can help.
Hojo, was it this talk or another one where you talked about where tech support for Zen?
Yeah, basically. If you're not using the application, the backup doesn't make any sense. Good. So we're going to quit a little early. Actually, it's 5 till. So thank you, John, for your online hosting. Anybody wants to follow up on this, please send email to myself, to Kosetsu, and so there's room for further discussion. But let's close with the 4 great vows as usual. And being our numberless, I vow to freedom. Delusions are impossible. I vow to gain from my being sorrow. I to enter them. Since are possible, I will to bring beings are numberless. To freedom. Delusions are impossible. I vow to Dharma to enter them. With beings unsurpassable. I vow. Beings are numberless. I vow to freedom. Delusions are impossible. I vow to bring wicked are. I vow to enter them. And put away every not possible. I vow to realize. Thank you for your attention and listening. Everybody online, please be aware we're doing a membership attendance drive here in Atlanta. So anything you can do to help invite people to come or invite a friend, please do so.
And the comedians say I'm here all week.
Hojo, can I put in a quick plug for our guest speaker?
Sure.
Next Sunday, we've got a special treat. Gareth Young of the Red Clay Sangha in Atlanta. He is the co-founder and guiding teacher of the Red Clay Sangha, and he has maintained a committed practice since 1999 in Zen, Chan, and Vipassana traditions. He received Dharma transmission in the Thai forest lineage of Ajahn Chah. He lives with his wife, their dogs, his chickens, and his bees. And he's scheduled to provide the Dharma talk Sunday.